Hi, so in this short video tip, we are going to cover a topic that was not covered last week, which is restricting trade. And I would like to cover Putin's war. I wouldn't like to say Russia's war because probably not all Russians agree with that war. I wouldn't like to see or say the European war either because it's only one country Ukraine at the moment in which we are recording this. It's just Ukraine. And as well, I would like to say East Europe, since I think Ukraine is something in the bond that is between East Europe and East. But yes, I think that is the position that Ukraine has in the country. And I pray and I want to send as well my wishes for everyone who is Ukrainian for like a very resolute and quick peace. Yes. So we are going to cover that war, Putin's war, and probably I should have written Putin's war in the title and arguments for restricting trade. So among the arguments for restricting trade is weaponizing economics, and that is going to have a lot of implications from now on. I think with everything that is happening in Ukraine, the world is using or is weaponizing economics, and that is going to bring a lot of consequences. So I bet many countries are going to start thinking on having their economic reserves, their currencies in their own countries, rather than having their reserves on a server in another bank in another country or in gold in another country. Particularly those countries who are not that close to the West. I believe that that is going to happen. And I think particularly some countries as well within West will see that as a problem, right? Because what could happen if someone, for instance, weaponized the euro, yes, and does not allow like Britain to like transact in euros or perform any other strategy to like stop like trading or to so as you can see is actually very dangerous. I think central bankers and governments as well, they need to think on that in weaponizing the financial system and weaponizing as well trade and weaponizing as well reserves and other stuff. But I agree. I agree that something needed to be done with Putin. I think that, however, this is going to be ramifications. Possibly, my prediction is that China is looking very carefully at everything, and it's possible that they are going, in my opinion, that they are going to do something about it, since they have reserves like around as well, and they have like rich people in China. They have properties everywhere, and they also have a lot of bonds from the government of the United States and currencies from many other countries. So and dollars, of course. So yes, I believe so. I believe that something is going to happen. In terms of crypto, I believe that that exchange rates are very connected to trade, and I believe that in terms of crypto, um, it's going to be a hurdle for crypto indeed, because Governments are sizing a lot of bitcoins. For instance, I read today that the Canadian government sized the bitcoin of a gang, and and it can carry on happening. Coinbase, like very famous, I think they are not like a cryptocurrency. They are like the blockchain provider or the provider of services for the cryptocurrencies. They also banned 25,000 Russians from transacting in their platforms. And it's possible that other platforms and other service providers for the crypto space are going to do the same. The FBI have traced transactions in the past from Bitcoin. So actually, Bitcoin is not as anonymous as people sometimes believe. Um, all transactions in the blockchain are traceable, and particularly, none of these companies would like to get into trouble with the United States. As you can see, what can happen in terms of finance if you mess around with the United States or with the UK as well. I think many other like Western countries they can go ballistic in terms of sanctions for individuals that are linked to like the crypto space. They can do that. So I think it has been demonstrated with everything that is going on. So in the aftermath of the sanctions that Russia has received, and the companies that have left Russia, among them Visa, Mastercard, American Express. Today was Goldman Sachs, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, um, and McDonald's. I think McDonald's was historical because the first thing that happened when the Iron Curtain, when the Soviet Union disappeared, was actually the fact that McDonald's was one of the first companies in the Soviet Union, and I think people enjoyed very much, like those companies from the West in those countries that were part of the Soviet Union. The picture today is totally different. Many countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, such as Lithuania, Estonia, etc., they are actually now part of the European Union. And I think that was the choice as well, the willingness of the Ukrainian people. Unfortunately, or the previous president, he did not allow the country to get into the European Union because he was pressured by Russia. So yes, the current president Zelensky, he does want to get into the European Union. At the moment, they have not accepted. I believe that in this regards, it's a shame that the UK is not there because otherwise they will be, or we will be there asking, to get Ukraine into the European Union. I believe. I believe so. I think UK has a lot of leadership. But anyway, I think that would have been like a guess rather than a prediction. Yes, so today we are going to cover the arguments for restricting trade, and let's talk a little bits and bits about Putin war. So let's go to my full desktop. So here we are in arguments for restricting trade. Let me see if they are presenting. Yes. Yes, I have here an update for my computer. I will do it later. So very quickly, because I need to record another video. So the arguments for restricting trades are these ones. So tariffs means that there are going to be some monetary barriers when exporting and importing products from countries to countries. Quotas means that it's not like a monetary barrier, but a quantity barrier. So that is something else that trade agreements can have. Exchange rate controls, yes, particularly when we want more like a steady control in terms of prices. So exchange rate controls happen when countries would like to get products at certain exchange rate, e.g. China. We have as well embargoes. Embargoes are situations in which countries restrict transactions with other countries, say the European Union, an embargo on parts for aircraft, and Russia today. I was reading the embargo from Russia. I think that is going to hurt West as well. The embargo of Russia is particularly in terms of commodities. So you have seen as well that nickel has actually increased a lot. I think 230% more or less in 2 days recently. The London Stock Exchange stopped the trade because it was skyrocketing. And I think one fund manager was actually under the heat of that a short squeeze. Short squeeze is when someone bets that the price is going down, and then many traders gather to shift the price up until make that person that bet in the price going down to change its position. It rocket sky. That is called a gamma squeeze. Yes, when the price just rocket sky, and that happened. It was historical for the nickel, and the base for that, I think, short squeeze is particularly that Russia is the country that provides like a very high percentage of nickel in the world. I believe that is 30 or 40%. I have seen too many figures now. Today, Russia has said that he's going to bring embargoes as well on agricultural products. At the moment in which obviously Ukraine is very central in terms of agricultural products, particularly wheat, and yes, I believe that is going to increase because wheat is in many products in the normal basket of households in Europe and the UK in general, right? So yes, sugar as well. They get an embargo in sugar and many other components. Hopefully, the embargo is not going to be gas. The gas is it will be difficult for Russia to say we are not sending gas to you, but I believe that is going to be probably more problematic for Germany since they depend almost all gas come from Russia. And the countries that were part of the Soviet Union, I think 90% or 93% of the gas come from Russia. So I think those countries are actually going to be like they can get a hard time if China decides to carry on buying the gas and trading with Russia and do not agree to join the sanctions of all the world. So that is the situation in which we are now. Obviously, in general, I will say that although these sanctions are going to backfire on us, I think they are going to stop at a very good extent what Putin is doing. Hopefully, that will be enough to restrain its activities. Well, I will say that possibly yes. I think you cannot just start producing everything that was being imported to your country from one day to the another. So we have as well administrative barriers, and administrative barriers is another interesting case, and is particularly the strategy of the European Union towards the UK. So the red tape. Red tape means that we need to fill up forms and too many procedures in order to try to export meat. So you need to go to the vet, you need to fill up this form, you need to find documents for the origin of the product. There are certain percentage, etc., and procurement policies as well. Procurement policies are those ones. Actually, procurement policies are those that well regulations that countries have in order to being able to export stuff to their own like citizens to get the things for their own citizens. So yes, so these are the arguments or the methods for restricting trade, and dumping as well. Sometimes you can provide some dumping when you like when the state, for instance, sponsors a certain product in order to be sold in another country. I think that happened a lot. And there are a lot of arguments from the UK about the dumping of the European Union and the other way around. Yes. So, particularly that happened before the pandemic when the European Union supported the airline companies. Yes, and obviously other countries protested because that puts in disadvantage the whole sector, other companies that are from the UK, for instance. Right. So, what are the economic arguments for that has some general validity for restricting trade? First, when you want to protect the like an infant industry, yes, that is the first argument. So therefore, you close the economy for that sector of the economy in order for that a growing sector of the economy to flourish, right? And I think that is something that is doing the United Arab Emirates. Yes, why? Because they're actually uh, trying to be like more relevant financially. So they are making very easy for dirty money, particularly from the oligarchs from Russia, to be sent to that country. So yes, so in that case, you provide certain arguments in order to, or you have an argument to protect that sector of the economy from external influence, right? And etc. There are many arguments, particularly in technological sectors. You can see that this is the fact, right? So, for instance, in terms of solar panels, so there are very strict barriers for other people to send solar panels to China, right? Because they want to be the producers of solar panels. A changing comparative advantage, so something that in the geography of the country that provides a comparative advantage, yes, a mine or a resource that is very is key. That is another argument to or a change in the comparative advantage is as well one of the arguments. One of the examples is, for instance, oil. Now the United States is one of the uh, biggest producers of oil. So yes, so when you want to or you are changing that comparative advantage, I think you would like to actually to um, restrict trade more, right? So you prefer to consume your own oil rather than try to import your oil from other countries, yes? To prevent dumping as well. So if you see another country that is sponsoring certain sector of firm to export to your own country. So therefore, you restrict the trade to stop that illicit activity to carry on going. Yes, to prevent establishment of a monopoly. So monopolies usually restricts competitiveness, yes, and competition, and that is actually not free markets, right? Because it's the fact that there is only one provider, and then people need to buy from that monopoly. So if the country do not like to have that monopoly, so then they restrict trade. One example might be Amazon. We have seen how many countries in Europe would like to put some taxes to Amazon and restricting that way the trade with them, because I think they're a monopoly of everything, right? Even sometimes in Amazon, if a product is selling very well, Amazon developed and create the product, and they themselves sell the product, which I believe is a little bit unethical. Also, to take account of externalities. So, externalities might be a pollution or social problems in general. So, social, political things that have been affected by the economy, right? So, restricting trade happened, for instance, for Coca-Cola when they deplete the water in India. It happens to BP in Ecuador when they destroy the rainforest in there, like a portion of the rainforest in Ecuador. Or it happens to in my own country when I think it was actually one tobacco company. Yeah, I will bring it probably as an example in another occasion, but in general, they sponsor fighters in my country, and obviously, people died because of these companies. So, in order to account for these externalities, you restrict trade with these with certain countries in order to protect the society in general from their wrongdoings. So let's cover the strategic trade theory. We have economic arguments uh, having some validity for specific countries. So to enable it to exploit a monopsony power. What will be the optimum tariff rate? I will show the explanation of this. So monopsony is the opposite to a monopoly. So in that regard, the one that has the power is the part that is demanding, not the part that is producing. The monopoly happens when, the country, the part that is demanding the service has actually total power on the problem. Yes. So it's a market structure in which a single buyer has the power um, um, and controls the market, the market price, and the producer cannot do anything but to sell at that price. So in general, I would say that at some extent the energy companies behave like that here in the cases they have certain limits at which they need to charge the people, right? So they need to deal with those limits as well to try to profit in the market. So here we have a country with a monopsony demand for an input. In this line we have here a pounds and here quantity. So since we have here prices and quantities, we can draw the world supply to the country and the demand by the country, right? So since this is a monopsony, so therefore we have here the suppliers, the producers, yes, to a country, and the demand for that country, and We can see the country as a whole is a monopoly, and firms are the price takers, right? So we can see that, or we could theorize that. So therefore, as you can see, this is the world surprise, and as the country is the one that sets the prices, so therefore they are the one who set the prices of everything. I think that this monopoly power, I think, is probably more evident in the United States economy, since their decisions affect the prices of everything, right? Um, yes, sometimes that feels a little bit like they are monopolizing, or manipulating the prices of everything, particularly if you trade commodities. But I think that is something that countries like to do in order to protect themselves from speculation on products. Yes, right. So this is the free market equilibrium, yes, and here we have this situation in which we have the maximum profit output for the country, yes. This is the marginal cost, and when the marginal cost finds the demand for the country, so therefore we have that maximum profit output for the country. The marginal cost is the curve is like the slope of the cost curve. Yes, and is like the rate at which cost increases when um, prices increase and quantity increase. Yes, so in general we are looking at changes in prices over changes in quantity. Here we have the price number two. So if we would like to set like a proper and optimum tariff, so therefore we will extend this equilibrium point from the marginal cost curve down here, and therefore this segment FE will be the optimum tariff in a situation in which we have a monopoly. So that would be actually what a country can do when they have, or when they behave like a monopoly. They are able to put optimum tariffs. And therefore, as there is an optimum tariff and the country has the possibility or the power, or the purchasing power, or the power from the side of the buyer, so therefore they are able to put a tariff on that product, and benefiting that way from trade. So that is an argument for restricting trade, particularly when you are able to be the only um, have that strength. Yes. So yes, some options. So, and also to enable it to exploit monopoly power, the optimal export tax rate. So let's see this example. So a country with a monopoly supply of an export. So this again, this is the world demand, and this is the marginal cost is equal to the total supply by the country. Again, we have this equilibrium point. The country as a whole has a monopoly, but firms are price takers. So this is the free market equilibrium. And then here we can set the opposite. Yes, we have the maximum profit output for the country here. This is the quantity 2. And if the country, given this marginal revenue, sets the quantity at this intersection B, right, they will be able to get the maximum profit at the price that is actually here at C. Why? Because the revenue is maximized in there. So that means that your revenue is larger when you are at point B, particularly in the situation in which the country has that monopoly or the monopoly supply of an export. Yes, and therefore they can actually put a tax, an optimum export tax for the firms of that product, right? And this will be therefore the maximum, the quantity will be the maximum profit output for the country. The size from P3 to P2 or the point C to B, that segment will be the optimum export tax. Finally, to protect declining industries, that is another argument for restricting trade and to improve balance of payments, particularly when you have a balance of payments that is totally out of control, e.g., the United States, I believe. Yes, I think is actually the deficit is getting every day worse. Apart from that, we have non-economic arguments, so you can put in there many things, social stuff, political stuff, ecological stuff, right, etc. And fallacious arguments, yes, there are many. Yes, I believe that some arguments are more ideology rather than proper arguments, such as that imports reduce the standards of living. That is not true. Actually, when you have a rich country, you import the most stuff. That is the case of the United Kingdom and the United States. So when the people is rich, they usually like to get some French wine or some things from other countries. Protection is needed from a cheap foreign labor. That is another argument. But the reality is that because of purchasing power parity, sometimes even though when people is paid like less in another countries when they produce, they can if they translate to buy the things with that money that they are receiving, they are actually able to buy well, probably not the same living standards than the UK, but they will be able to pay for the things that they need. So, yes, I am not talking here about slavery, which is totally different. The fact that sometimes there abuse of labor, right, in other countries. It's not that such as, for instance, workers on chips, like working on chips in very poor conditions to send clothes to other countries or things like that, right? Um, yes. Protection reduces unemployment. Yes, that is another fallacious argument. Dumping is always bad for the importing country. Not always. This is not always the case. If we get things with like other government is sponsoring and they are cheap, not always that is bad for the importing country. It's bad when for instance, we have a sector of the economy that is involved or has been like decreased, or it has stagnated because of the problem of dumping, but not when, for instance, you receive more for what you need to pay, right? That there is not such a big like a sector in that dumped product. So not always is bad. So there are as well problems for restricting trade, problems with protection, the welfare laws from protection. So here we have again the free trade position with the world. So this green line here is the world. This is the price of the world. As you can see, it has better price than the equilibrium price in this graph, and therefore imagine that a tariff is imposed So therefore, we have this situation in which actually the quantity supplied is Q3 and passed from Q1 to Q3, and the quantity demanded decreased. Yes, the living standards, people are able to buy less actually. Yes, and that is a cost, right? Because you are able to produce less with to consume less with your money. So in general, this will be the cost, the area, EDCBC, well, the loss of the consumer surplus because of the new tariff, and area 1 equals the gain in the producer surplus when we have the situation. So not everything is bad. So this will be the area 1 will be a gain, yes, because we will need to produce more in the country when we have tariffs. Yes, so supposedly there are going to be some gains, and area 3 equals the revenue of the tariff. So the country will be benefit because it has some tariff. So areas 2 and 4 are net losses. So the big red area, what loss, what we were losing. So these areas 2 and 4 are the net loss. So the benefits minus the costs. Okay, so in terms of the problems with protection, we have as well the more multiplier effect, retaliation. Retaliation is when other countries restrict the trade. When you restrict the trade, so you get into a trade war. Hopefully, that is not going to happen with Brexit. Also, cushions of inefficiency that happens when you need to start producing things that you are not specialized at. That is possibly the case of Russia now, and they will need to start starting from scratch to do things that they do not have the know-how to do. Another problems with protection is bureaucracy. So you I think probably will see in the future, in the television, in the news, how bureaucracy has increased in the borders with the European Union, and as well bureaucracy in North Ireland. Yes, even one of the ministers says that actually that was very good. Anyway, so that is a problem actually. When there is bureaucracy, that means that you need to pay, the trade is paying for someone for sign documents and make everything more complicated. Finally, problems with protection is as well corruption. So you need to put certain offices to control a trade, and that can generate the situation in which traders try to send some sleaze or to bribe the bureaucrats or the people that are working at those offices, and that creates a lot of corruption. Okay, I think this is the argument for restricting trade, and we talk a lot about the Putin wars and particularly the topic of that was set at the beginning, yes, the arguments for restricting trade and how Russia has restricted trade and how the West and other countries have restricted trade with Russia. Okay, guys, I will see you in my next video.